Create Live. This is Talkback.
Thanks for joining us on Talkback. I'm Bharati Jagdish with Andrea Achak. Now, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong has given the assurance that Singaporeans will be provided for when they retire. In his National Day rally speech on Sunday, he highlighted how many Singaporeans have significant savings in their flats, which can be unlocked in their retirement. Aside from raising, right-sizing or renting out a room in your home as options, he announced that the lease buyback scheme will be extended to owners of 4-room flats. This will open up the asset monetization option to more than half of all flat owners here. But would you monetize your flat? If so, which options would you consider? If not, tell us why. He also announced a new silver support scheme for low-income elderly. Under this, the government will pay a bonus each year to needy elderly, 65 and above. This will help them with their living expenses and will be in addition to other government and community support.
Now, the Prime Minister also announced an adjustment in the CPF policy to allow those 65 and above the option to take out part of their CPF savings in a lump sum when they need to, an amount not exceeding 20% of what's in their account. However, taking out a lump sum will leave you with less in your CPF account, which will mean smaller monthly payouts during your retirement. Will you still consider this option? What would you spend your lump sum on? An advisory committee will be set up to look into introducing greater flexibility to the CPF system. What other types of flexibility would you like to see in the CPF system? And how best can it serve you and your family's retirement needs? Call us on 669-11938, or you can start talking to us on Facebook, official 938 Live. Now, joining us today is Professor Joseph Cherian. He is Director of NUS Business School's Center for Asset Management Research and Investments. Welcome back, Joe.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Now, tell us first of all what you think of the lease buyback scheme being extended to 4-roomers. Many analysts are a little skeptical. They say that it might continue to see a limited take-up rate because when it was for 3-room flat owners, it was already being taken up only in a limited fashion as well. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think it's a great idea, and it opens up a larger pool of people who can subscribe to it. There are some things that need to be changed, and maybe that's what's that's what explains the lower take-up rate. But we are in the 4-room case. Remember, it'll be worth a lot more, the home, so the cash-out value will be a lot more as well. So we have to also be careful. We have to temper the bonus schemes and the subsidies that come with these lease buyback schemes accordingly.
How to temper, and what are the factors that would determine how much to temper?
Well, that's a factor of how much your house is worth. Remember, this program is directed to the asset-rich, cash-poor, lower and middle-income group people. So there are some subsidies like a cash bonus scheme in the LBS and a few other things that are sort of what I call implicit subsidies. We have to be careful not to extend the subsidies to everyone. This should be, I think there's a 3,000 monthly household income cap that should be retained. So I'm just saying that it's great that they have it, but we have to be careful not to hand out gifts
to people who don't need them.
Who don't really need them. Yeah.
Let's talk about something that several analysts have brought up as reasons for why the take-up rate may not go much higher than it is currently with the 3-room flat owners. One reason is the fear of outliving one's lease. What do you think can be done in this regard?
I think a few others have spoken about it, including myself. One thing that can be introduced, which won't cost a lot, is to say, look, you can retain your 30-year lease. The government will buy, the HDB or whoever will buy back the residual lease, anything in excess of 30 years, but still give the people the peace of mind, the people who take up the lease buyback scheme, the peace of mind that in case you live beyond the 30-year life, you will not be kicked out of your home.
Right.
So convert it to a life program.
So that's the assurance that can be worked into the scheme.
Yeah, I think my intuition tells me that will probably help in the take-up rate because some people are fearful that at the end of the 30 years, what happens. Although they know the government will take care of them, they're not sure what it means. Do I have to uproot myself at the age of 92 or 95? That's not something most people want to do.
Some have also talked about how they would prefer to bequeath their flats to their children. So that might also cause the take-up rate to be lower. How do you feel about this? We want to know. You can call us 669-11938. Now, Joseph, how will younger people buying resale flats now benefit from this, considering that they may be buying their flats in their late 20s or early 30s with fewer years on the lease from the very beginning?
Bharati, that's a very good question. In fact, I had not thought too much about that, and that's something that we have to take into account, either the HDB or MND, because all you can get is the residual lease in excess. That what you can sell is the residual lease in excess of 30 years. So if you have a 50-year lease left in your house, you retain 30, you can only sell 20. If you have a 40-year lease left, you can only sell 10 years. So the value becomes a lot less. So at some point, it becomes not so meaningful to your retirement pot to participate in the lease buyback scheme. So this is something the authorities have to look into.
How do you think overall the lease buyback scheme can be made more robust to increase its attractiveness and to increase its use and utility for the individual in Singapore?
Okay, let me reiterate that I think it's a good program. Just a few tweaks. Hopefully, by converting it to a life program, giving the assurance contractually that you won't be kicked out in case you live beyond the 30-year life of the lease. That's one way. Hopefully that will increase the take-up rate. The other would be to simplify the process. If you look through the booklets right now, they're very voluminous. I mean, 12 pages is already criminal, metaphorically speaking. I think it should be a simple program that's easy for everyone to understand, that they don't need to have advanced degree in algebra to figure out how it works.
Okay, you've mentioned, Joe, a couple of times that the buyback scheme needs to be, extended, right? I mean, if it's longer than the 30 years that the people live, so how can this assurance be given to people? Could it be a group insurance policy that is worked into the system?
Well, I think it should be seamless to the participants of the program. Remember, we are trying to increase the take-up rate and solve our retirement problem here,
and
right?
Streamline and simplify.
Simplify it and basically embed it into the program. So if there's going to be a small insurance, longevity risk insurance that has to be paid, embed it into the program. Take it out of that cash out value. Make it simple and don't make it too costly.
Because money is a big issue.
It's a big issue. The whole idea is to supplement their retirement savings. Don't make it such a costly insurance program. But the government should actually, MND and HDB, should figure out how much it costs, what the longevity risk is, what to insure it, and then embed it into the program and make it seamless to the participants.
So do the changes go far enough to serve you and your family better in your retirement years? We want to know. Call us 669-11938. Thanks for joining us on Talkback on 938 Live, discussing some of the announcements in Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong's National Day rally speech on Sunday. He talked about how many Singaporeans have significant savings in their flats, which can be unlocked in their retirement. Also, talking about the new Silver Support Scheme for low-income elderly and adjustments in the CPF policy to allow those aged 65 and above the option to take out part of their CPF savings in a lump sum when they need to, an amount not exceeding 20% of what's in their account. Now, an advisory committee will be set up to look at introducing greater flexibility to the CPF system. What other types of flexibility would you like to see in the CPF system? We're joined today by Professor Joseph Cherian. He's Director of NUS Business School Center for Asset Management Research and Investments. Now, Joseph, earlier we were talking about the lease buyback scheme, and there are some uncertainties here. For instance, what happens when the 99-year lease actually runs out for young couples who are now buying resale flats, for instance? I know this is a problem that will only become a problem really in a few decades from now, but still, if we were to think long term, how do you think individuals can be assured of security in that regard?
Again, as I mentioned, that's a very good question and legitimate concern. Part of our goal of creating the CPF and all these lease buyback schemes is to reduce the uncertainty of our retirement income, and also if we live too long. Now, that said, there should be some assurances placed. I'm sure the government has some plan as the lease approaches its maturity. There is some plan probably to renew the lease, to top up the lease, whatever you want to call it. But I think one way we can get around this is to provide more clarity about what will happen at the end of the lease. That way, someone who's bought a short-term lease will know exactly what it will be worth upon the termination of the lease.
Stay with us on 938 Live. We're taking your phone calls now. We've got Zul joining us now. Hi, Zul. Good morning.
Hello?
Yes, Zul, you're on the air. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, speaking. Why did the government, CPF minimum sum? I disagree about the minimum sum. You know what happened?
The minimum sum, right?
Working for young until old. Why the government take all our money? It's like rob our money, you know?
Okay, thank you very much, Zul. We will talk about the minimum sum right away because I know that that is a point of contention for a lot of people. The Prime Minister in his speech mentioned that the current minimum sum of $155,000 is actually far from excessive, and he illustrated this as well because you have needs during retirement. We're also talking about having to deal with inflationary costs, so on and so forth. What do you think, Joseph? Do people still not understand why the minimum sum needs to go up periodically? Zul says that he feels that the government's taking his money.
Well, first of all, I'm not a government spokesman, but I'm speaking as an outsider, as an academic. The money belongs to you. That is not the government's money, and the government keeps reassuring you that the money belongs to you. The second thing is $155,000 to stretch it out over your lifetime in retirement income is really not a lot. Again, we've discussed this at previous shows of yours.
Yes.
That $155,000 translates to $1,200 per month for life if you enter into the CPF Life Annuity Program.
And that's provided it's cash.
That's right, and that's not a huge sum of money for a lot of people. It's probably enough to just get you by, but it's not a large sum of money. So we have to take things into context. Maybe people who do not understand this whole concept of immortality, longevity, inflation, and so on, time value of money, may have difficulty understanding this. But as someone who is a professional, and I'm not the only one, there were a lot of other finance professionals spoke about it. $155,000 to last you a lifetime in retirement is actually not a whole lot of money.
Yeah, so it wouldn't really give you the income you need in order to enjoy your retirement years. You might just make it if you're considering inflation in the next few years as well. That will be something that we will continue talking about in just a moment. But let's talk about the adjustment in the CPF policy to allow those 65 and above the option to take out part of their CPF savings in a lump sum when they need to, an amount not exceeding 20% of what's in their account. This is a way of introducing flexibility into the system for people like Zul who perhaps want to withdraw more of their money. Perhaps they can, but under what conditions do you think this should be allowed?
Well, like the Prime Minister, if you observe his body language and his language himself, he was very uncomfortable about coming up with this flexibility. I am as uncomfortable because all we're trying to do here is provide more for retirement, a sufficient amount, and allowing takeouts or withdrawals. Only delays the process and complicates the process.
In fact, one of our listeners yesterday, Richard, says that it's equivalent to kicking the can down the road. It doesn't
correct.
solve the problem.
That's absolutely correct. So I think there are certain circumstances that it can be allowed for emergencies, personal expenses like health reasons, whatever. There should be some compassionate grounds on which someone is allowed to withdraw.
Right.
The only other time someone should be allowed to withdraw this amount is if they have exceeded the minimum sum. In fact, I say if they've exceeded minimum sum, give them full flexibility to withdraw whatever they need.
Right.
So, there's a limit to how much you allow, but after a certain point, i.e. beyond the minimum sum, give full flexibility.
What do you think of the new silver support scheme for low-income elderly? No doubt, if we're talking about low-income elderly, they need the money, and the government will be paying out bonuses to these individuals on top of other assistance schemes that they might receive help from as well. But to what extent do you think this might actually dissuade family members, for instance, from helping out the elderly within their families?
Look, I think that we should not be relying on your neighbor and your children and grandchildren to fund your retirement. At the end of the day, it depends on you, and perhaps a bit of help if you're one of the disenfranchised, elderly, poor, lower income. There should be some support, not a lavish amount, but some support like the Silver Support Program. So I think that's a really good program. I'm very happy about it. Some people may argue, oh, you give this cash bonus, it may be misspent on, other things, and then again they end up, But
again, it's after 65.
Correct. So one way you can get around this cash being misspent is to probably give it out as food coupons or something, because we're talking about subsistence living.
Right.
And so you can have an arrangement with, the grocery store to say, look, if they show their IDs and if they are in the Silver Support Program, they can buy a certain amount of staples, something like that.
Let's see what Raymond has to say about all of this. Hi, Raymond. Good morning. Raymond, are you there? Raymond, I tell you what, while we're waiting for you to get ready, we will continue with the news and we'll get back to you. Stay with us on 938 Live. You can, of course, call us as well on 669-11938. Thanks for joining us on Talkback on 938 Live. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong has given the assurance that Singaporeans will be provided for when they retire. But how secure do you feel? Now, in his National Day rally speech on Sunday, he highlighted how many Singaporeans, in fact, have significant savings in their flats, which can be unlocked in their retirement. He announced that the lease buyback scheme will be extended to owners of 4-room flats. Would you monetize your flats? Which options would you consider? Would you rent out your home? Would you right size? Would you use the lease buyback scheme? Also, a new silver support scheme for low-income elderly. He also announced an adjustment in the CPF policy to allow those 65 and above the option to take out part of their CPF in a lump sum when they need to, an amount not exceeding 20% of what's in their account. What other types of flexibility would you like to see in the CPF system? Joseph Cherian joins us. He's a professor and director of NUS Business School Center for Asset Management Research and Investments. Now, Joseph, earlier you mentioned that even with the minimum sum of $155,000, as was illustrated by the Prime Minister as well, you get about $1,200 a month during your retirement years, which is really not a huge amount. In fact, it might be even inadequate in your retirement years, considering inflation, so on and so forth. $2,000 a month, too, is considered by some as poor retirement income. To what extent do you think more needs to be done earlier in order to address this? In other words, why are CPF savings not enough in the first place? Shouldn't we be trying to resolve that problem at its root rather than try to fix the situation when you hit retirement and you find yourself not having enough?
That's absolutely right. This should be started very early, this program, so the young are strongly encouraged to save for retirement. It should be almost second nature, and there should be programs to encourage the young to not just take up the standard CPF savings rates, but to also participate in the supplementary retirement scheme. We've mentioned before, you can put aside $12,750 a year in supplemental retirement accounts, in private accounts. So I think everything should be done. Educational jingles should be developed to actually encourage savings at a younger age. The problem is at a late stage, people are finding they don't have enough. I think that's because we are digging into the pot early on, and that could be perhaps for housing, education, and other needs.
You have said before that the CPF is laden with too many objectives. Perhaps housing programs should be run as separate tax-advantaged programs like in the US. Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not the only one who said that. Just today in the Straits Times, Professor Hui Wing Tat has brought up the same issue. He's written an op-ed on this issue, and he too observed it's surprising why many people don't have enough, and he conjectures that it's probably because they took too much out for their housing. I think many people recognize it. We've just got to handle and manage this, and both sides, from the government side and the people side, the member side, CPF member side, they have to realize saving for retirement is essential, and then having a roof over your head is also important.
Yes.
But you have to make sure you buy something that you can...
Within your means.
Within your means, exactly.
Now, Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam had explained previously that CPF is aimed at tackling basic needs, not at catering to the full retirement needs of the upper middle income group or the higher income group. However, I know that the middle income group group is facing a lot of pressures. While there is great help for those in the lower income group, what's your advice to middle income Singaporeans?
This is a difficult one because they are the ones who are caught in between. They can't qualify for any workfare or other programs, yet they are expected to fend for themselves. I hope the house that they have can be utilized to supplement their retirement needs. That would be my first order answer.
Sure.
Stay with us on 938 Live, taking your calls as well. Christina joins us now. Hi, Christina.
Hi, morning everyone.
Morning, Christina.
Okay, I just want to tell the public that the money inside your CPF is your money. There's nothing to worry. I have two instances. A friend of mine who actually just turned 55, and because she met her minimum sum scheme, she asked for some money. On her birthday, she got her money deposited into her bank account, whatever she asked from CPF. And the other friend of mine, whose father passed away, I think within 7 days or so, whatever the father has willed, the money was actually, they actually received a check. So I think there's nothing to worry that the government is going to take your money, or that is your money. So we have to spend it wisely.
Thank you very much for that, Christina. I'm glad you understand that. However, we have been receiving some calls from listeners who say, why is there a minimum sum? I feel as if the government is keeping my money. What more do you think needs to be done, Joseph, in terms of having this point actually be driven home to most Singaporeans? Several members of the government have come out to explain this as well. CPF is your money. There's nothing to worry about. But some people still don't seem convinced.
Yeah, well, one thing is we can have more people like Christina on the radio show. She seems to have gotten it, and she seems to have instances where friends have been able to withdraw without any problems, amounts above the minimum sum. But I also think the ownership thing, as Christina said very correctly, you own the money. Nobody else owns it. It's your money. That ownership thing, sometimes it can be psychological. I remember I have a CPF account and I have US retirement accounts. I get a statement every month or every quarter about how much there is. Now, I opted for the online option since I want to save trees.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is maybe this is one way the government can help people understand their money. Reminding them by giving them physical statements.
Every month, more frequently.
Every month, or maybe at a quarterly basis at a minimum.
Currently, we do get statements, but I believe it's once every 6 months or so.
Okay, well, the thing is, I opted for the online option, and people can opt for that if they want to save trees and all that. But for the rest of them, let them have the statements and understand that this is my account, just like a bank statement. This belongs to me. It's there for my retirement. That might help.
To what extent do you think, though, that because they can't touch it and they see the nation doing well as a country, economic growth is still quite healthy, but they feel that their lot in life has not become better, that this might be causing some angst over the minimum sum?
Yeah, well, the thing is, again, I come back to what Deputy Prime Minister Tharman has said, that the retirement program is really to meet your subsistence level standard of living.
When you decide to stop working.
Correct.
As well.
Now, the thing is, it's always difficult when you have a neighbor who is able to enjoy the leisures of life and you are just surviving on a subsistence amount in retirement. Now, the thing is, you can work longer. There's so many things one can do. But at the same time, keeping up the Joneses is a very difficult problem. We should just be, my view is live within your means kind of response.
Now, an advisory committee will be set up to look at introducing greater flexibility to the system. What other types of flexibility would you like to see in the CPF system, Joseph?
If at all, there should be more flexibility.
What we could do is, as I said, allow withdrawals over and above the minimum sum. Have less limits there. Keep the housing program flexible enough for life. The few things, inflation indexing. is
Of
another
the
issue.
payouts, the
Of
CPF life payouts.
These are some of the things we've discussed many times before.
Earlier, we talked about how the housing program perhaps should be run as a separate tax-advantaged program like in the US. You explained it. But to what extent do you think the government might consider this in the future so that more of CPF can be used for retirement?
I think this comes back to the fundamental question. This is something for the advisory committee to look at, probably, to look at the entire program and maybe go back to its original roots. I understand in the early days, the CPF was purely for retirement. So keep a separate program for housing, for education, and so on. Keep it simple. So this may be something that can be tasked to the advisory committee, whoever they may be, to look at the program, come up with a long-term plan to go back to your roots of what the CPF is meant to be, and then create different tax advantage programs for the other needs in life.
Let's see what Peter has to say about this. Hi, Peter. Oh, apparently we've lost Peter. Let's see who else is joining us now. Hello, good morning. Good morning. Hello. Well, unfortunately, can't get that person on the line either. So let's come back to you, Joseph. Now, in an article you co-authored recently, you said that every attempt should be made by the CPF board to synchronize the age at which the minimum sum is converted into a CPF life annuity product, which is currently 55, and the age at which an individual can begin to receive annuity payouts, currently between 60 and 65, to a later date. Can you simplify this for us, since we've been talking about how the system needs to be simplified? What do you mean exactly?
Okay, let me explain it this way. One thing governments around the world, including Singapore, has done is to increase the retirement age. Why? So that people can earn a living longer and worry about retirement at a later stage in life.
Right.
Now, the CPF life drawdown age is 65. It depends on a certain formula, but it's somewhere around 65. Now, what I'm saying is the minimum sum has to be attained under current circumstances at 55. All I'm saying is allow them to save up for a longer period, that means up to 65, up to their drawdown age, to achieve that minimum sum. It gives them more time to catch up, as opposed to having to make some emergency decisions at the age of 55 to meet the minimum sum. That's all I'm saying. Put the two dates together.
So does this mean that the drawdown age will be later as well?
No, not necessarily. Keep the drawdown age at 65, whatever the retirement date is. If you retire at 65, that's the date of your drawdown when the payouts come out. All I'm saying is allow the accumulation towards the minimum sum be extended out to 65.
You see,
as
the
well.
thing is, once you reach 50, your contribution rate to the CPF is already reduced in that sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it is.
Yeah, so
I mean, with this problem we're having about not enough savings for a lot of people,
so maybe that should be relooked.
they should look at that. That's another thing. The advisory committee has a lot of things to look at.
So the employer CPF as well as the employee CPF should not be lowered just because you've
I
hit a
think
certain
right
age.
now it tapers down to 11%, and maybe that should be relooked at.
Right.
Now, some are still asking if CPF interest rates can be boosted. Many experts, including yourself in the past, have said that this is not feasible. Why not feasible? Let's explain that again so that people understand.
Let me try to explain this as simply as possible. You get up to 5% in certain accounts under certain conditions in your CPF savings account. Okay? Now, the government is literally borrowing from you when you get that 5%. That's how the bank does it as well. When you get a deposit rate from the bank's actually borrowing from you. The government can actually borrow in capital markets at 3%. That's the maximum borrowing rate if they go to the public market and the people from the US, China buy their bonds. The maximum borrowing rate is 3%. Now the government's borrowing at 5% from you, which is a 2% premium.
That's right.
To me, that's a subsidy. That means that's a good rate. If the government starts offering something more than 5%, that's going to be a strain on its balance sheet. So I hope people understand that 5% riskless is a very, very good savings rate. And to ask for more in that scenario is going to be difficult for the government to meet.
Because it impacts the reserves as well.
Correct.
You have mentioned that building awareness of the various aspects of the scheme is important. Presenting all of these facts in a simpler manner is important. Going forward, what other aspects of the system do you think need to be scrutinized further? What factors need to be considered more deeply going forward when it comes to communicating all of these things as well? We
are facing an aging population, changing demographics, and also inflation. So all these things can affect housing values, economic growth rates, investment values and returns. we got to be prepared for a rainy day ahead. So my view is that while we say we are saving up and preparing for the future,
Right.
we also have to factor in all these changing real life scenarios in the economy as we plan for retirement.
Many thanks. Joseph Cherian, Professor and Director of NUS Business School's Center for Asset Management Research and Investments. You can continue talking to us on Facebook, official 938 Live. Many thanks for your phone calls this morning as well.